Hello, everybody, and welcome back to This Is the Year, the Swiss-based artificial intelligence podcast where we deconstruct all things that happen in the great world of AI. And today, why not you, Bene, are doing the introduction into this episode that we're talking about MCP, we're talking about reasoning, and some new interesting metrics. Reason being, Bene, you're on holiday in Brazil, and at the end of the day, you have to do something. So give it a shot.
Hello, everyone. So basically, I'm in holidays in Brazil. Right now, I'm in more countryside. I'm in Goiânia. I've been for the past 4 days in Rio. It's like amazing, a bit dystopian because you can have higher quality and not as good quality of life there. And I'm still on, I haven't, today's my 10th day, so I'm half on my holidays. So as Cyril said, presenting here, we have an amazing main host that I'm doing his parts right now, Cyril, and we also have João, who is the AI wizard who's been working, but these last few days he's on holidays too, because he's like, João can't be the only one, Benny can't be the only one on holidays. I need to go on holidays with him because he is not the only one who can slack off.
Yeah, I was very
How are
jealous
you
of you being
guys?
on vacation. Ben has been sharing pictures of a trip across Brazil, and is just even if where I am is still sunny, it's still very good weather. It's not real levels of the sunny side and the beach that Ben has been going to.
Brazilian vibes is not in hasn't been arrived into Europe yet, but it's good.
Not just yet.
Happy to see you, Benio, online. You're moving a lot in Brazil. Rio is always amazing. I was there like summer 1 year ago, and it's always a great time to be in Rio de Janeiro.
Yeah, that's great. So
Great.
Most
the
importantly,
topics.
have you
Yes.
been seeing the possibilities of using agents in your travel? So if you're going on a plane, are you seeing where agents could be used? Because you need to compile a list of things
Just
by the end of the trip.
a really great fun joke. Brazil should be run by AI agents. That's corruption.
I need
think
to
we're still
check
a
if
bit
I can
far
leave
from
this
there,
in the
but
video, not that we get flagged by some Brazilian
Sorry,
authorities.
shit.
this is being
All
said
good.
by a Brazilian guy, so it should be fine.
Exactly. It's an unbiased, biased Brazilian, guys. Gentlemen, let's get into the topics today. As I teased it at the beginning, we initially will be talking first about MCP. We talked about that multiple times on these episodes in the past. However, we need to bring it up again because there has been some development just for the audience and for context. Model Context Protocol has been released only a few months ago by Anthropic, but now it's basically being adopted by many different industry players, for example, Google into Gemini and so much more that we're going to be talking in today's episode. And maybe I could just quickly give it to you again, Bena, in the sense of what has really been the development on that front regarding MCP, why do we need it, and what's really been kind of new added on to that,
Yeah,
well, basically,
for sure.
context.
So as we've been talking in the last episodes, MCP has been starting to build up and ramp up on all platforms, and I think we could have seen that on N8N, so low-code platform. They've been using that to integrate with third-party tools, and then 2 weeks ago we had the release of on the Google I/O with Gemini. They started to integrate with every on their own ecosystem and also allowing integrations with external providers. And now I think it was this week or last week, OpenAI already released this integration through MCP as well with all everything. So for you to record callings, to summarize, to integrate with several apps on your computer or on your phone, and allowing also for you to integrate with parties that third parties that they haven't provided, because again we have this amazing open source protocol that Anthropic had the brilliant idea to provide and to create to establish a pattern, and now we've been seeing this MCP protocol taking off.
Maybe, Joao, from a business perspective, why do we need this? Like, what is really the added value to that? And maybe I can add my 1-2 bits on that as well, but maybe first from your side.
An agent, of course, you're gonna have your own internal tools to maybe search your own documents, integrate with your own software, like your own CRM, and that's a very specific thing to you as a company. But you also use software from other companies. So you use, maybe you're using Gmail or Outlook from Microsoft. Maybe you want to integrate with Jira or like some whiteboard platforms where you're writing down your notes. And so having agent that can actually integrate with that, and that can actually, maybe they're seeing your notes and they can read off that to make summaries of your meetings. But maybe they actually can participate in your meetings, like we had a couple weeks ago in your own panel, like having an AI agent there. They can be the one writing and doing diagrams in your meetings for you, so you don't have to exercise your drawing skills. You can just offload that to an agent. And so having more MCP servers, having more MCP integrations means your agent can interact and do more things. And that's just, I think, always useful. You still have to be selective in like what you want your agent to do. Yeah, you don't want it to play around. You don't want to give it like the access to just scroll infinitely on Instagram. But for example, Meta has an MCP server for the ads API, so you have an agent that can read off, for example, your ad performance, get those numbers off for you, so you can make a summary, for example, for you to customize to what you want, and you can actually know what's happening in your ads. Are they performing well, and what's performing well on Meta's platform? So there's a bunch of possibilities that are being created, and you as a business can either use those MCP servers, or you can make your own and charge for them, of course.
Let me attempt a comparison. I don't know if that
Try.
makes sense.
Go ahead
But
and try,
pre-MCP, you only had the robot and it didn't have any arms. So basically with MCP, you give the robot or the AI the capabilities to have hands and an arm and to basically be interacting with tools like that. So it can reach out to certain tools automatically. And before that, you were just able to talk to the robot. But now the actual robot can, I don't know, build a pizza or something. It can actually do something.
How
Well,
much time have you been thinking about this comparison?
Well,
It's amazing.
it's 1-2 hours in meditation state that I was like thinking about. No, I was just like, we've always been using this like gold analogy, remember, like shovels and everything. So I don't know. In my opinion, it was like that. They can reach out. They have hands. Now they can move certain tools around and they can deploy and combine them like we humans, basically. All in the knowledge domain, right? So we're still talking about a software and not a physical robot. But yeah, that's the attempt. I don't know. Maybe I need to optimize. Not yet. Yeah, not yet. Maybe in the future it will be. But yeah, that's my best bites. For the business context, why does it matter to have that? Well, again, Joe pointed it out perfectly. You want to have integration to your landscapes. You don't want to have an isolated, siloed entity, even if it's super smart, because AI, at the end of the day, like a human, is best deployed if she, he, or it, in that context, have access to many different surrounding systems and can execute actions either autonomously or with a human in the loop. So that's maybe why MCP is gaining adoption. Very initially, I think we talked about that multiple episodes earlier, that yes, it's been an open protocol, but again, with OpenAI adopting it, Google adopting it, I think it will be reaching mainstream, if it hasn't already by now. So that was the MCP notion. If you're building AI nowadays in your corporation, in your startup, or as an agency, this is certainly a concept. And we put it into the description and maybe quickly on the screen here that you should be definitely looking into, again, to be creating and connecting different systems with the AIs. Gentlemen, let's move to the second topic. We talked multiple times about it already. It's all about the metrics. Metrics, just for the audience that are maybe new to the channel here, highly important, especially if you are building certain domains, for example, for your clients. You would want to have metrics to be keeping yourself accountable, but also to have a defense once they're not unhappy with service delivery. For an internal project or your startup, you would want to have many different metrics just in place to have control over your cost. AI is fairly expensive, it's running in a cloud, but also you would want to have control over your quality. And I think this new metric, and I'm still sometimes struggling with pronouncing it. It has been around for some time, but I think it's gaining traction maybe for one particular reason. Teased probably too much already, but psychopathic, is that 100% correct? I think it is.
So no, the metric is
close
called,
enough, I think.
The metric is called elephant. So basically,
the metric is elephant, yeah.
So it's easier to spot when the AI models are being overly psychopathic.
Okay, so the notion is psychopathic and the metric
Do you want
elephant.
to explain what's psychopathic?
Absolutely not. I gave it to Schwab.
I think it's just like, if people have been keeping track, I've gone on Twitter, there's a lot of examples of ChatGPTs like from OpenAI just agreeing with every single thing you say. So if you say like, oh, I'd love to eat rocks. I think rocks are like amazing. They're salty and like crunchy. And the model, instead of saying, that's kind of weird, you shouldn't maybe do that, he was saying, what a great idea. I think you're onto something. What a great recipe. You're groundbreaking culinary cuisine. And this was happening with a lot of things, like people just proposing just wild things, and the model was disagreeing. And even in normal conversation, oh, I'm trying to do like this thing, like I want to send an email to do this. And instead of just helping you write the email, you would also say, oh man, you're back. This is a genius level writing. Amazing. Like, great job. Let's get on that. And it sounds fun at first, and I think that's initially why it happened. But it gets to a point where if you're proposing something that's a bit wrong, imagine you're trying to build a company and you're saying, oh yeah, I want to set up the company in Spain because of it's the best tax for it. If the model is too sycophantic, so it's too agreeing with you, it might not correct you and say, actually, for your purposes and for what you told me, it'd be better to set up your company maybe in France, or maybe in Portugal, or maybe in Italy. Like, there could be better options, but the model is too focused on agreeing with you than to actually correct you and actually help you.
Yeah, basically
And you
the
try
model.
to introduce,
Yeah. So basically, the model right now is not challenging us. So basically, it's just agreeing instead of challenging, providing more options, and saying sometimes maybe that's not the best option. Maybe you should see this. And
It lacks critical thinking, so it
yeah,
can't like critically reflect on any particular domain. It's just trying to make the user happy, basically.
Yeah.
So it's overly accepting the fact that whatever you shoot at it, it's kind of agreeing most of the time. I think just a quick analogy, right? So if you go to university as a student, I've encountered multiple times, especially in the classes I'm teaching, I always have to say you have to be critically reflecting, even on the items I'm telling you. Especially when you see in the news, when you read research, you always have to assume there might be some bias or might be some hidden gems in these messages, and you always have to critically think which is correct and what part is maybe completely biased or completely wrong. So I think similar to like how we just generally the population are teaching students to critically reflect on outputs, critically reflect on results. Maybe again for the AIs, we do have to do that notion once again. Is it something you believe it's like solvable with prompt engineering, or we need a completely different way of modeling first?
João, take this one. I want to hear you to disagree.
If you'll go back to the last like 5 models of whichever company is your favorite, like you go to OpenAI's latest 5 GPT models, and they've been working towards prompt adherence. How good were the models at following your instructions? People were amazed and like really happy that every new interaction, every new iteration of the model was getting better at it. So if you're asked to do a specific thing, it only do that specific thing. If you asked, hey, I want 2 sentences about this, it wouldn't write a chapter, it wouldn't write like go off script, it wouldn't go to another topic, it'll just do the thing you asked, and that's amazing. Super important if you're trying to build an agent. Thing is, I think we've been working so much towards prompt adherence, then we made the models too agreeing with us, and to the point that we actually can start to trick the models into doing the wrong thing, and the model is not really trying to challenge it or trying to correct it. And now it's a matter of striking a balance. So in the terms of training, I think that's on OpenAI and Anthropic and Google and like all the major companies training these models. They're going to try to find a middle ground between agreeing with you but also following your instructions, just not to a point where it's like insane. But I think it's very subjective, right? There's no real balance, like no really good, perfect balance between the two. It's going to be up to the companies, and it's going to be up to the audience criticizing the models, saying, actually, I think it's too agreeing, and they're going to dial it back a little bit. We'll see. Because on you, once you get the model, I mean, you can have instructions, but I'm not sure if you can just fix it if the model comes trained like that.
No, you disagree. Then I can
No,
add
actually,
my bite.
this time I do. I think it's because I'm on the holiday
I'm on
mode.
holiday.
I don't.
He's more relaxed. He's more agreeing.
Yeah. So basically, I do agree.
So you're very psychopathic today.
He's not challenging us.
Yes. No. To add up on that, I do believe that and on the news they say there's no current fix, and this is on the models providers to research and implement a fix. But we can do some, not perfectly, but with prompting, because it's a bit too agreeable. It will agree with your prompting, so you could try to add some challenging critical thinking on the prompting. That will help a bit, but it won't fix all the problems. But with this metric, you can actually test and see when, before releasing your product, just allow you to run this metric to see if is this too agreeable. Do we want this? Depending on your business area, what you want and your needs. Sometimes you do want the model to be too agreeable, because sometimes the tools and things that you provide won't allow him to hallucinate that much, because hopefully you made a great product with great engineers, and you did plenty of testing and with some plenty of metrics, and you will be able to track this behavior even before this metric was released. And now this is released, and it's easier to track down and to try to improve. But this is mainly for the model providers.
I think
On a
it's,
personal level,
yeah,
like
sure, go
if
on.
you're using ChatGPT or like any kind of chatbot, what I advise you to do is, if you're trying to get like an actual opinion on it, like you're trying to workshop an idea, you should add to your prompt, hey, give me your opinion. I actually criticize this, like find the flaws in it. So you have to kind of to force it to be critical, force it to be a bit disagreeing, and then you can get some real output out of it. Otherwise, your idea is always amazing, even if it's not.
Yeah, but it's a UX challenge as well, right? So if you're a model provider and you have a super disagreeing model, it's kind of a bit annoying. It's like you have a project, let's assume, and then you have always this one engineer that's like completely disagreeing with you all the time. You just don't get anywhere. So it's like you have to have this balance of like solid disagreement, which is reasoned, and then you have to find this balance with, again, agreeing on most elements. So I think that's probably why it's so difficult on that notion. This critical thinking usually has to rely on foundational knowledge about whatever context you're talking about. And then you should also only be disagreeing like selectively and not all the time, because otherwise it's super annoying. And also the execution maybe on automation tasks won't work. So that's maybe why it's a challenge. I think it's super interesting. You guys, maybe just to summarize, you pointed out, yes, we can augment the models with prompt engineering, particularly to, again, be looking for the flaws, or to be less likely to be agreeing all the time, but it still is on the model providers. But I think it's a great notion to be aware of, especially if you're building solutions that they're most likely have a tendency to be too agreeing on whatever the user is sending it to. Great, gentlemen. Third topic.
You can help it to actually choose the model, because if it becomes a metric and becomes like a standardized metric you can see on benchmarks, whenever a new model comes out, you can see how agreeing it is and whether it fits your use case. So it starts becoming a new thing to take into consideration, besides the price, besides where it's hosted, but also its personality starts to become a real factor in choosing the model.
So right now we just see more and more things regarding personality. And just to add up, I don't know if you were going to get into this, Cyril, regarding their own language.
Yeah. So that was the next step. But just one more sentence on that. I mean, I think it might add a critical factor as well. So if you have a super disagreeing model just to a team, kind of. So this AI might always be the black wolf in the sheep herd or something. So it might always be disagreeing, but it helps to critically reflect for the humans. So if you have super agreeing humans collaborating with a super disagreeing AI, that might also be an interesting dynamic on just collaboration. Like you want to staff a project that has multiple of these elements in it, right? If, for example, in a project team, you don't only want to have the agreeing people all the time, and the AI could then take this notion based on what Joao said, that the metric is displayed, so you can opt in for the model that's disagreeing.
Yeah.
Then,
and for instance, for code review.
Exactly. You want to have not a complete pass model all the time. That's exactly true. So for different tasks, you might want to have disagreement more likely than agreement all the time. Yes, you teased it already, Bene. Maybe I can quickly dive into the third topic on the internal reasoning. Just to roll up the context, I think like 4 or 5 episodes ago, we talked about AIs developing their own language. Why that is that maybe somewhat meaningful or necessary, because we force them to adhere to a certain language for their reasoning part. They reason in human language. Most of the time that's English. Most often it's English. Sometimes it's Chinese, depending on the model. And we just do that because this is kind of our way to communicate as humans. They're based on tokens, they're based somewhat on the human alphabet, and so on and so forth. So we do that to represent our own way of thinking. This new notion is basically the AI is creating their own language, sometimes because it's faster, sometimes because it's just better for their type of thinking, kind of. And now we're moving into this field of, let's say, moving away from the human language and closer to an AI language itself. For different reasons, maybe that's the setup just from that notion. Benna, you can maybe take it from here on complexity reduction. Why does it make sense and things to look out for?
No, so basically what's happened is, again, Anthropic. Anthropic is being amazing on this part with the metric for elephant. So and now again they're providing tools because they did some research on this part, and basically they discovered that actually the models already have their own language. They're already doing internal reasoning in their own language, and then they're translating to the language that is being spoken, either English or Chinese, as you said. And this is crazy to think about. 5 episodes ago, we're talking, oh, this is something that we can be doing to improve the performance, but the LLMs have been already doing it, and we're being kind of degrading the performance for us to understand. And I think with these tools, maybe in the future, we don't need the reasoning, and with the tools, we can just have some visibility on what's going on when we need to. We don't have to have that all the time. From a business perspective, what do you think, Sean?
I think people will want to do that, even if you kept the same performance, but you could save this a little bit on the CPU. There's been such a global strain on hardware, on not having the processing power to handle millions and millions of requests, both from like OpenAI doing ChatGPT, but also for your own models, your own agents in your company. You only get so much quota of these tokens, of these models. And so if you can get a bit more tokens, a bit more usage out of them for the same price, and just have a little bit less load on the CPU and GPU side of things, there's going to be a whole lot of interest in doing that. Thing is, again, it's a kind of balance. You still want to see what's happening underneath the hood, especially for development, especially for the debugging. But if that becomes an optional step, if that becomes a thing that you can turn off to when you go into production, then you know the thing is stable, it's giving you the right kind of answers, the right kind of output, but you're getting a model that's a bit more performant and a bit lighter on your machines, on your servers.
Yeah, maybe as Bennett said, like maybe you could just have an aggregated view on the reasoning as opposed to a super detailed one. Or a selective view, you can opt in or opt out to understand, maybe for monitoring purposes. But certainly probably more aggregation as opposed to less aggregation on the reasoning. Like, to be honest, maybe that's just my personal biased opinion. I hardly ever check what the model just reasoned through. Like, I'm not particularly interested in how it kind of does it.
You want the final output.
I just want the final output as soon as possible. But maybe from an engineer...
Yeah. In the beginning, it was very interesting, but right now I don't look. Just sometimes when I don't agree with the output very much, I go look at the reasoning.
I mean, it's like it's the same as the humans, right? We hardly ever, if you read a research paper, if it's peer reviewed or if it's in the news, we infer that the news article is valid because of the source, and in the sense of peer-reviewed articles, we assume that the peer review process was okay, but in neither of them we validate how they actually came to that thought.
So read the 50 papers, the 50 pages of the paper.
Yeah, you hardly do. I mean, I have no clue about the peer-reviewed articles I'm sharing with everybody, how they actually were able to be peer-reviewed. I just assume they are, and if it's coming from some like certified source, I kind of also assume that it's good journalism. So maybe for the AI world, it's just going to be the same tendency. We do have some sort of quality label, maybe OpenAI, Anthropic, Gemini can kind of add that on that, or an external auditor, like some sort of external supervision entity on the reasoning part can kind of say, okay, like solidly reason through that. And once this has this label, we kind of trust the AI output. So that could be something maybe we see happening. Certainly, again, I don't use that feature whatsoever. I just literally check, is it actually starting to think? Okay, fine, I'm waiting now. So that's
I think there's a really good advantage. When reasoning models came out, I think I may have mentioned early on in the podcast that I was not super into the reasoning models, mostly because it was hard to use them in an agent, in your own custom software, because the output takes way longer, right? Like these models are thinking, they're writing, they're thinking, and only after maybe a few minutes you get the actual result out of it, the result that you can use. And so it become not unusable, but harder to use for your everyday applications where you want each agent to do a specific thing. And if they go into this direction where the agents can reason, but they will reason in their own language, so far the papers I've been seeing is that the reasoning is a lot faster. So they don't have to write it in your own grammar. They have to think about like how to write in good English or good Portuguese or good Chinese. They can just think in your own abstract language, which is natural for them. It's more efficient in terms of tokens because they don't have to put periods and commas and everything else. Like it's a very like native language for them, and so you can still have the reasoning, you still have the same performance, possibly even better performance because you don't not losing meaning by translating languages, and it's a lot less tokens, so it becomes cheaper and becomes faster for you.
Yeah,
And
I mean, it's
reasoning
kind
models
of
become an actual viable option to have in your own agentic framework.
yeah, because you won't want to have faster token throughput if they are like actually enabled by that new language kind of. I wouldn't personally don't mind. It's just again, it probably a bit scary thought that we don't know how they're actually reasoning, thinking
No,
anymore.
if you think of
But
it,
yeah.
they basically already have their universal language. We can just try to output that, and when we need, we have a translation.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe maybe just double clicking on this guys quickly. I mean, we in this podcast, we are all probably reasoning in different languages. What language do you guys reason? Portuguese, English, or some other language?
It's usually a mix.
It's a mix, okay.
Yeah.
Because I find this
And
super fascinating, this like multiple language reasoning. Anyway, sorry, sure, I'll go.
And if I'm deep reading like a French book, sometimes I find myself thinking on a thing like it's a mix of Portuguese and English. Sometimes I'll have like a French word in there because it's just easier to say or easier to have it on my mind. And so I imagine for an LLM that knows like over 50 languages, they'd love to actually be able to play around with that instead of being forced to only one language.
But you reason in Portuguese mostly? Like if you had to give like a daily ratio, is mostly Portuguese or mostly English?
I think it might be mostly English, just because I'm.
Do you think English, you kind of,
Yeah, I mean,
if you do like an analysis, it's English in your head, kind of?
sometimes, yeah. I mean, it depends on the topic. I think that's,
Okay.
again, like one of those things where if you think about like a software project, I'm doing code, the code is usually in English.
In English, yeah.
And so things become in English. If I'm trying to track out and I could do an agenda for the day, I have to interact with Portuguese people, and so that's probably going in Portuguese.
That's kind of fascinating, right? You have the same, Ben? Then I can add my
So
split.
basically, there's researchers saying that when you're using language, you have different personalities, and you're actually triggering different parts of your brain, and this happens a lot. And it's even funny because even in the same language, Portuguese, I do have two different ways of thinking: on Brazilian
The right one and the wrong one.
Portuguese aspect. The good way, the awesome way of the country
This
where I
Brazilian.
am. No, but both ways all have their strengths and their setbacks, and having a mix. And the more languages you learn, at the beginning you use probably your native tongue, but after a while you actually start to adding that language on your toolkit, and you actually start thinking with that language as well. And even sometimes you're used to speak, and this happens a lot to me. I forget the meaning of like a word in Portuguese, and I know it in English, and I say it in English, and I'm like, crap, I don't remember the word in Portuguese. Even in English, it's the same. So the model has 15 or 16 languages. So that universal language is a mix all of them because it makes all of sense. We do act like that, so why can't they?
Exactly. I mean, that was my kind of reasoning or thinking here. But yeah, I think I'm like for the personal stuff. So I journal every single morning for like multiple years. This stuff is usually done in High German. But again, High German for me as a Swiss person, I also have to translate. So if I think Swiss German, if I write High German, not the same thing. So there's a translation happening. And then many times, like you mentioned, Joao, it would be English for business topics. So it's kind of a mess. Like I have this similar to you, Ben. So you probably have like 2.5 languages. I have the same. And again, the models have 50 to choose from, or however many they have. And we humans have kind of a similar challenge, and we have different ways of translating it fast. especially if it's late at night, you probably have a tendency to choose the language you grew up with. So it's really all this semantic moving around between different languages that it's just fascinating to see. Now we are actually talking about that like you would be speaking about a child, but in the AI world.
Yeah.
What language should you think? What should we teach? Like, what should we enforce? Because if you're a parent and you would like to raise your kid multilingual, like in Switzerland, this is super common. You have to make a conscious decision and stick to that language for many, many years. Otherwise, the kid gets confused. So in my case, it was like German and French, where I grew up. And for the AI, it's probably English, Chinese, I don't know. So it's really, really fascinating stuff. All these language semantics and like ideally, yes, the AI comes up with its own more efficient language based on the compute quality and speed. Great. Gentlemen, any other topics from your end? I think we quickly teased at the very beginning before we shot some wearables or any other topics you want to share, Bene, your road for people to track
so
you.
basically, one of the things that would been awesome to have on this trip, because I've been using a tool that some colleagues at work provided, Polar Steps. So basically, just an app to track your trip, and I love an integration with and to have already the Meta glasses, the new ones, the Aria Gen 2 AI, because I think that would be awesome. At the same time that it could be recording from my perspective that the camera normally doesn't. But I do also like to take pictures. I'm not taking that away, but also providing information that sometimes I'm not seeing. And people comment this to me sometimes because I was visiting and my cousin was there with me. I was looking at things and she has been there for quite a while that she hasn't noticed. And with these AI glasses, I think we can start noticing even more things that we normally don't see because we're not paying attention fully to the scenario. And this has been awesome. But again, this is can be used for good and bad. Where will it take us?
That's
Yeah,
good. That's true.
We've this, I think, in the last episode where there's this OpenAI bot, John Ivy's company, and they're like starting this IO thing, and we still have very little knowledge of what actually will come out of it. I'm not sure if they'll know what they're going to build yet. I think they might have an idea, but everything right up until now is just rumors. But one of the things they said, and we have that data, is they wanted to be a device that doesn't have screens and it's meant for you to spend less time on your phone. And I think most parents are like already aware of that. You have a generation like kids that are so used to having on their phones, like scrolling TikTok or YouTube or whatever. And if they actually pull it off, and it's a big if because companies have tried and companies have failed at that. But if they pull it off and there's some, let's say, give them credit because it's a very big company and John Ives is like a credited designer from Apple. I think it'd be a really interesting like step forward in society having a kind of device that's different from the iPhone, like different from your typical smartphone. I'm interested in how it's going to play out. If it's not going to have a screen, most interactions could be through voice, could be like with AI agents. And it might be like your new primary way of connecting to the internet and connecting to your social platforms.
Maybe they like collaborate with, even though it's a bit unlikely, Neuralink or something. So we have a like crazy brain interface. Because otherwise, what's the options even? It's like a voice input, which is super bit constrained. You can only talk so fast and you can only receive, even though you can speed it up to 2x, information so slow. Like I don't know, just the voice input for me seems implausible.
I don't think people want to go like on a metro or on a bus and
I don't think
speaking out loud to the phone. Like you don't want people to know what you're searching on Google. I wouldn't want them to know that. Sometimes I even delete the history for myself because I want to forget that I didn't know how to pronounce that specific word. So you don't want to have that kind of interaction being made public. So it becomes like what possibilities are there for a quiet interaction that still allows for the bandwidth of information, so you can still output a lot of information and get a lot of information back from the device without a screen.
Exactly. I mean, this is exactly the ratio you have to balance. It's the input bit speed, basically, as Elon Musk always said it with Neuralink, to be significantly higher than our thumbs can basically click or write on a keyboard. Even slower is when I tested the Apple glasses or the VR. in China recently. I mean, it took me forever to do any of these haptics, you know, like forget about writing in that context.
But
And then
what do you
voice,
think about eye tracking for those scenarios? With eye
yeah,
tracking, you could, yeah.
that's true. Maybe you can, but you don't need to look. And it's maybe also eye straining a little bit. And there's all these challenges, right? So currently the best is the phone screen. In the future, I think the ideal is the interface to the brain. But this is probably some decades away, maybe still. I don't know. Maybe they speed it up. Great. So let's wrap it up just for the audience. Today we talked about MCP. You can be using these servers to interact AI and make it interactable with the surrounding software landscapes. That's a great notion and certainly will be adopted by more companies very, very soon. We talked about AI metrics, Elephant being one of them, tracking the agreeableness of an AI model, something that really, really is part of the educational landscape as well. We need to give these model critical thinking. Once they do have that, they can disagree with humans and aim for better results. And at the end of the day, we also talked about AI thinking, reasoning in its own language. If that is a good or a bad thing, I think we commonly agreed it is. It just needs to have some quality labeling, how it actually is executing it. So in case we want to know how it did it, there is a gateway to know. We wrapped it up today with some, let's call it futuristic topics in the world of AI. But that's really, really what this podcast is all about. If you're new to the channel, we shoot these episodes every single week from the perspective of AI engineering, enabling entrepreneurs, professionals, corporates, AI individuals to be building with these cool models. That's why it is called This Is the Year, because we believe, well, this is the year to build stuff.
Yeah.
Gentlemen,
and it's just a funny note. We actually are in 3 different countries on this episode. So yeah,
we're multinational everywhere.
Podcast with a multinational audience.
Exactly. So let me do the wrap up according to the country. From Switzerland, from my perspective, from Portugal, from Joao's perspective, and Brazil, from Benes. Geographic location currently, and we are wrapping up the episode. Bene, have a good trip. Joao, take care in your holiday. Go to Caparica or something. And
good work, Cyril.
From my end,
Cyril, have fun working.
I'm out working as always. Yes. Good. See you in the next one. Gentlemen, take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.